stories are how we convey information from generation to generation. Without those stories and without people to tell them and hear them, we can't convey those values.
Welcome back to At Our Table. You know, when I think about the most important moments in my life, I don't remember them as facts. I remember them as stories. The story of my grandparents helping raise me in Orangeburg, South Carolina. The story of teachers who believed in me before I believed in myself. The story of leaders like John Lewis and Jim Clyburn who challenged a nation to become better than what it was. That's how we make sense of the world. That's how we pass values from one generation to the next. That's how movements are built. Stories. My guest today has spent a lifetime understanding their power. Roger Wolfson has lived a remarkable life at the intersection of politics, public service, and entertainment. He worked in the United States Senate before building an Emmy-winning career in Hollywood, helping create stories that reach millions of Americans. And through all of those experiences, Roger has come to understand something many leaders still struggle to grasp. People don't move because of talking points. They don't sacrifice for policy memos. They move when something touches their heart. That's one of the reasons Roger and I recently partnered to launch Blue Heartbeat. This is an effort dedicated to helping leaders, candidates, organizations, and businesses communicate through authentic stories that connect with people on a human level. Because in a world flooded with information, connection has become one of the most valuable commodities there is. So today we're talking about Washington, Hollywood, politics, storytelling, leadership, and why the stories we tell may ultimately determine the future we build. Roger, my friend, welcome to At Our Table.
Thanks so much, Jaime. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you, my friend. Now, there are a lot of people who know Roger Wolfson, the Hollywood screenwriter, right? But few know Roger Wolfson, the Senate staffer. Tell us about your journey and how a young man interested in public service eventually found himself writing for television. You're also a lawyer as well. So give us the backstory, that origin story, as you know from Hollywood. What is the Roger Wolfson origin story?
Well, thank you, Jaime. I guess it starts with my first campaign that I worked on when I was 6 years old. So Joe Lieberman, who ended up becoming the senator and then the vice presidential nominee, was my carpool driver to my elementary school.
Oh, wow.
And he was he was my best friend's dad. And he was also my jogging partner. He was my mother's law partner. We were a very close family. And when I was 6 years old, me and Matt Lieberman handed out flyers on election day around, you had to be a certain distance from the polls. So my first lesson was, actually my very first political lesson, Jaime, was ethics. I learned that you had to be a certain distance away to hand out information. And that kind of stuck with me. I was like, wow, you know something? There's right at the heart of politics, they're trying to do good. They're trying to do it right. There's principles. I learned about politics and principles at the exact same time. Now that may have been a misleading enterprise. I may have been misled a lot, but that helped shape my vision. It helped shape my vision. And then when I went to, I was actually an actor in college, and I was a good one. And I went to Vassar, and there were people like Noah Baumbach and Jason Blum from Blumhouse were at school with me, and I really wanted to act, but my parents took a very active involvement in my career, and they bribed me to go to law school because they didn't think that it was possible to make a living in a creative profession. To their credit, they just really believed it wasn't possible.
Yeah.
To my discredit, I bought it, and maybe it was because there was reluctance. So I went to law school. I went to law school, and Elizabeth Warren was one of my professors, and she was at that point a bankruptcy professor. She taught the least sexy subject of all. No one goes into, most people when they go to law school, they want to do something like principled or they want to make money. And they don't see how you can do either in bankruptcy. It looks like the opposite of that. but she was somebody who was so impassioned. She saw the civil rights issue in bankruptcy. She saw the civil rights issue in there, and she made me excited about that. So I ended up practicing civil rights law, and then decided that what happens is I practiced employment discrimination and sexual harassment, which is mostly minority female clients.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember back then, because you went to law school as well, but most civil rights law is federal, which means that you go to federal judges, and most federal judges are Republican, much to our chagrin, right, Jamie?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I found was I was working for clients, and I was part of the team that would persuade them to take a risk and put themselves out there and fight for their own values and fight for the people like them. And they would take the stand and they would get slaughtered. And the number one opposition and defense from the people they were suing was, you're incompetent. And I saw brave women who I cared about and I respected have friends of theirs, colleagues of theirs talk about their incompetence. And part of the reason was that law was that it was very easy to get that kind of information in, and objections would be overruled by these conservative judges. So I was like, I'm going to the Senate. And I went to the Senate and I started working for Joe Lieberman. I was fortunate to have that connection, but I knew I didn't want to stay working for somebody, and he never paid me. I moved from him to John Kerry.
Yeah.
And I was John Kerry's domestic social policy advisor. And he's the one who made me a writer, because he wanted me to be a speechwriter.
Oh, wow.
And so I was his speechwriter and his domestic policy advisor. And then I left him because he was too conservative for me. And I was joint counsel to Ted Kennedy and Paul Wellstone. And for those of you who don't know, who are listening, who don't know Paul Wellstone was the gold standard for liberals when he was alive.
Yeah.
And he was just a beautiful person. And I just remember, you and I talked about this, Jamie. We talk about the uplifting moments in our careers. The most uplifting moment I can really remember was being on the Senate floor, sitting in that little tiny chair that they try and embarrass you with, the staff get right behind the senator when they speak. And Paul Wellstone would grab the mic and he would give a speech that I gave. And he would always depart from the script. He was a much better writer than I was, but he would just raise the roof. The pages, Jamie, would line up to listen to the guy. Just like raptured. He was just amazing. My heart I couldn't contain it. I couldn't hold it down in my chest.
Well, Roger, when you think about it, you served in the Senate probably, like, if you had to come up with, like, what are some modern day glory times of serving on the Hill, and particularly in the United States Senate. I think the caliber of the folks serving in the Senate at that point in time, when you think of a Paul Wellstone, when you think of a Ted Kennedy, when you think of these folks, I mean, that was really this great deliberative body, right? And you worked for some of the folks who were almost like the conscience of the U.S. Senate at that time, and laid the foundation for a lot of, the civil rights fights of today.
Well, and I'll use it. Robert Byrd.
Yeah.
I don't remember Robert Byrd, but I sat on the Senate floor. Robert Byrd gave a lecture about the Roman Senate and the history of the Senate off the cuff from the top of his head for hours. There were these geniuses. And then that actually leads me to the connection that I had with you, Jamie, which is one of the most disturbing moments of my life was I was floor staff during the Clinton impeachment trials. And that's when I first met a young congressman from South Carolina named Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham showed up on that floor, on the Senate floor that I revered. And by the way, I don't want, I'm sure you have a bipartisan audience. Jim Jeffords. I mean, I could name Nancy Kassenbaum. I could name great Republicans who I would have worked for, I loved. But Lindsey Graham showed up. And this guy was just so smarmy. And I'd never seen really outright smarmy on the Senate floor before. And it made my skin crawl. And, and as a Senate staffer, even when I left the Senate, I was very reluctant to ever donate to a campaign. I just didn't, because I would rather give my services, and I was practiced in helping, not in giving. The very first Senate campaign I ever donated to, the very first campaign I ever donated to, was Jamie Harrison versus Lindsey Graham. And part of it was a hatred of Lindsey, don't get me wrong. But the other thing was, I just saw your face. I saw you speak. I saw, that incredible Jamie smile that we all know so well, and that I have also been fortunate to see that you passed on to your son. Um, you know, and I imagine that that smile came somewhat from Jimmy Lou.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope so. But anyway, I that was the first campaign I gave to, and
No,
that was why.
thank you, my friend. That means a lot, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you also referencing my grandmother, who so much of who I am is because of who she was and who my grandfather was. So I really appreciate that.
And I think
Um,
that, and you were saying, and that's what's so important, Jamie, because what you and I are trying to do here is stories are how we convey information from generation to generation. It's the
that's
way it's
exactly
been
right.
since the dawn of the human animal. Without those stories and without people to tell them and hear them, we can't convey those values. The values you got from Jimmy Lou, the values I got from Paul Wellstone. To conclude that story, what I was telling you is that Paul Wellstone was killed in a plane crash in 2002. I'm sorry, 2004. And I actually, one or the other, will correct me which one I'm wrong. It's been so long at this point. But when he died, it was the worst moment of my life.
Mm.
And I couldn't, even for Ted Kennedy, I couldn't work for anybody else. So I sold all my possessions. I sold my condo in Washington, D.C., which still kills me for doing so because it's so valuable now. And I bought a sailboat and I started sailing around the world. And I never thought I would go back to politics. I never thought I would go back to politics. I landed in Los Angeles. I became a screenwriter. My success happened very rapidly. The first script I ever wrote was a West Wing. Um, Aaron Sorkin really helped make my career because I learned how to write by writing a West Wing. And it wasn't a produced West Wing script, don't get me wrong, but that was a spec script that I wrote that ended up getting me offers of representation. And then I wrote for a whole bunch of shows. And the first words that were ever uttered that I wrote were uttered by Viola Davis in a TV show called Century City. So I really had a beautiful, beautiful time writing, and I still do. But my bosses kept running for things and they kept involving me. John Kerry ran for president. Joe Lieberman ran for president. Elizabeth Warren ran for president. All these people who I knew and I cared about. So they started dragging me back in. But I didn't become really activated. I didn't say, this is something I need to do until Trump showed up.
Well,
And that's when I realized that Democrats needed the storytelling techniques that I had learned, and I wanted to be part of teaching them.
well, Roger, I want to go back though, and we will definitely uh, dive into what we are working on together in terms of Blue Heartbeat and this the power of storytelling and how we're trying to make sure that we and particularly Democrats are doing a better job of doing that. But I do think it's interesting for folks to have a better understanding of that transition from you as a Hill staffer to now Hollywood screenwriter, because I'm sure there's some young folks that are there now on the Hill who may be saying, "Oh my God, like that's what I want to do. I want to eventually go out and do that. I want to be a Roger Wolfson." Uh, how did you? They often say DC is Hollywood for ugly people, right? But so how did you? What was the link or the connection to get you to go from Washington D.C. to Los Angeles? Like, was there somebody there who you knew or that said, "Oh, okay, come on, Roger, the water's good over here. I'll make some introductions for you."
Well, I will tell you this. I was fortunate in a couple of things. I think there's really two reasons that things worked out well. And the first, really, there was somebody, and it was Lawrence O'Donnell,
Yeah,
who we both
I
who we
love
both know
Lawrence.
well.
Yeah.
Lawrence, I mean, Lawrence barely knew me when I worked in the Senate, but when I worked for John Kerry, I was in the Russell Senate office building, and he was working for Pat Moynihan. For the finance committee. He was running the finance committee. I was this junior kid, and he was a big adult, and he's also much taller than I am. But we knew each other somewhat well. And then when he moved from the West Wing to get his own show, which was called Mr. Sterling, starred Josh Brolin, and that was about a senator from California. It was an NBC show. It was going to be a big hit. I just sent him a memo because I was so excited for him. I just sent him a 12-page memo reminding him of all the little details from the Senate that I thought needed to go in that show. Next thing, he invited me to come to Washington, to Los Angeles. And I showed up in his office and he had my memo and he had highlighted it. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get a chance to write for this show. And I said, all right, can you hire me? Can I be a writer? And he laughed. He said, well, do you have a script? Do you have something? Have you ever written a script? And I was like, well, no, but look at my memo. And, and he said, okay, just shut up for a moment, Roger. And he gave me a bunch of West Wing scripts, including one that he had won an Emmy for, which was the one about the death penalty. I don't know if you remember, that was beautiful. And I went home and I read all those scripts and I wrote one of my own. And that's where the second thing I was want to bring up, which is going to disparage all my friends in Los Angeles, but potentially uplift all my friends on the East Coast. I brought an East Coast work ethic to Los Angeles. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people in LA who work very, very hard. I don't know if they work as hard as people in Washington, D.C. and New York, and South Carolina. I mean, I don't know. There might be a difference, but like there is this intensity, I think, that comes from Washington. And I think that it was both a good thing and a bad thing. When I was working in Washington, I really felt like what I was doing was so important. It deserved and required my best effort. When I got to Los Angeles, I had that same feeling because I knew that my first episode of television was going to reach a larger audience than any speech I'd ever written. And so I just really threw myself into it. And fortunately, I think I had some chops too. But when I finished that West Wing script, I gave it to Deborah Kahn, who's now the showrunner of The Diplomat. And she was a writer for The West Wing at the time. And I said, what do you think of this script? And she read it and she said, it's really good. You're shocking me because most people I know from outside of Los Angeles do not give me good scripts. You've got chops, but it's not a West Wing script. And she told me all the rules that I had broken for the West Wing. And do you know what I did, Jamie?
What?
I threw it out, wrote a whole new one. Only took me 3 weeks. And that's the script that got me represented at CAA and got me my first staffing job.
Wow.
So what I did was I entered this city with a sense of humility about it, with the East Coast work ethic, and with the values that I had been taught that this is important. Because the real moment I decided I wanted to write was when I was on the Senate floor and we had just passed the Higher Education Act, which was a multi-billion-dollar piece of legislation, and it had taken so much life out of me. And then my counterpart, who was the chief education counsel for the Republicans, came over right when we were done, patted me on the back and said, let's get started on the next one. And I felt like, Jamie, I felt like I was going to die. I was like, oh my God, we have to start another one of these. And I realized I could spend the rest of my life fighting for education dollars as if they were a drop of my own blood, which is the way I treated it.
Yep.
And never necessarily have an appreciable impact on the way one American child looks at another American child or the world. That it's not necessarily happening in the classroom. As important as the classroom is, don't get me wrong, you and I both know it's important. But values very often come from storytellers.
Yes.
They come from the box the box. Hopefully what you and I are doing right now, what you and I and Kyle are doing right now are transmitting values to people by telling these stories. And I felt, hey, I could be creatively satisfied and I could be part of that process by working in Hollywood. And that's what brought me here.
And Roger, you were so right. I think one of the things that brought us together is this belief that facts inform people, but stories move people. Why do facts often lose to stories?
Well, by and large, it has to do with how the mind works. You and I know this. I want to make sure I say something fresh for your audience because I respect your audience. We all, we know that the left brain is logic and facts, but the right brain, I'm going to put a new term on it. The right brain is really our moneymaker. It's our genius. It's our inspiration. The right brain is connected to our emotions, but that's also where we get that flash of insight, where we connect to our subconscious, where we dip into the collective unconscious. We do it through the right brain. And so when you talk about a fact or a figure, you're speaking to the left brain. And it can work and can be very logical, very reasoned, but it doesn't get to the heart. It doesn't inspire. Now, you and I both know there's one exception to that, which is the fact that tells the story. There's always a way around it. Storytelling has so many different nuances and angles, but if a fact tells a story, if it really can trigger a visual, if it can affect your senses, if it can really move you, then a fact is telling a story. But short of that, most facts don't. And look, you and I hopefully are going to teach a lot of Democratic office holders and candidates how to pick facts that tell stories, that
Yeah.
move people, that inspire people. But that, as you've heard me say, and as we will say many times, the biggest problem that Democrats have is that we're right.
Yeah.
And because we're right, we want to argue the facts. It's natural. And when we argue the facts, we end up in our upper register, as I am now. We end up trying to make an argument. We want to say, no, 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 you have to believe me. You have to agree with me. No one wants to agree with you. They want to feel something of their own. So ultimately, the biggest lesson of all, and this is the biggest thing that I try and teach when I work on speeches, and that you got automatically, and that's one of the things I loved about you from the first time when I met you. I was like, I have nothing to teach Jaime Harrison. Jaime Harrison is the model of what I believe in. But what you get is that when you're moved, people aren't going to be moved.
Yes.
That's the key. That's the ultimate key. If you, as a speaker, are not having an emotional experience, and I know I'm feeling it right now because I'm having an emotional experience talking to you. If you're not having an emotional experience, your audience can't. So much of picking that fact or that story involves what moves the speaker, not the audience. And we as Democrats very often we're sensitive. We are. I mean, it's coming from a good place. We're sensitive. We care about the audience. So what we end up doing is we try and figure out what they want to hear, what will move them. We have to stop that. We have to move ourselves and trust that it will move them.
Roger, that was so powerful, my friend. You've seen politics and you've seen what's going on in Hollywood. Who do you believe are some of the greatest storytellers you've observed in public life?
Modern day, or because in the past it was Dale Bumpers. These great senators. In the current, a lot of people point to Obama, and I think Obama is a great orator. I don't know if he's the best storyteller. I don't think he is. I think he is a spectacular orator, and I've never seen a politician with greater discipline and dignity and strength.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't necessarily tell a yarn, not necessarily. I think he does more of it now than he does as president. In this current day, I'm hard pressed to find a great example.
Yeah.
I would say that, you and I, so Jaime and I, I'm speaking to the audience, we trained the South Carolina Democratic Party a couple of months ago. And it was really beautiful. And seeing the stories that they had to tell and seeing their passion and their purpose was truly inspiring. But the highlight of the entire weekend for me was the story, Jaime, that you told about the woman who saw you, the cleaning woman who saw you in the Senate, in the congressional office on the Hill. You're an example, and I don't say this just because you're on the call with me. You're the first example I think of. I will try and come up with others so that doesn't sound like I'm just trying to flatter you.
No, I appreciate
that. At this moment, I'm hard pressed. And if you don't mind, can I turn it around to you?
Yeah.
Do you see somebody out there who you really think is a gold standard?
It is really, really, really hard to figure out the folks who evoke emotion when you listen to them, who inspire you in some ways. There are people who I think have moments. And my one person that I love listening to talk at times, and some of his stories evoke emotion. My friend Cory Booker from New Jersey. I often love, and I think it wasn't him telling stories, but me visualizing the things that he went through in the stories he told, and I would visualize the things that he went through was John Lewis. I
Yeah.
loved it when Congressman Lewis would stand up in the middle of the House Dem caucus and tell a story, and you wouldn't hear like you could hear a needle drop, right? Because people listen to every word, and it was partly because of his experience, but also his words. And he always emoted when he spoke. He was really good at that.
Lewis understood how to savor the story.
Yes, yes.
So many orators, there's very few orators now who know how to pause and just let a moment land and
Mm-hmm.
and talk more softly and draw people in. Just slow down, and he could do that. And by the way, that's what I wish both of us could teach Cory.
Yeah.
Cory is exceptional orator. I love Cory, and I've known him since um, before he ever ran for office. Cory tends to stay at 11. He's so passionate and he's so energized that he just gets up there and he stays up there. I want to help Cory have the full range because I think Cory could really do it.
Oh,
Because what
I think
Cory has,
so.
what you and I both know is Cory's got heart,
He has heart.
right?
And that's the thing, you know. And I often tell folks, I've known Cory since I was 18, 19 years old.
You
And
go further back than I do.
yeah, and so some people think that it is, you know, it's a facade. Somebody can't be that nice. They can't be that genuine. You know, they're involved in politics and they have to be. That is what you see in Cory Booker is what I saw when I was 18 years old. It has not changed. That is who he is to the very, very core, and that's why I love him. I mean, because I've seen that is he is genuine as genuine can be, and is as passionate, and he's always been passionate about things. But you're right, he's always at 11.
Yeah,
um,
and well, it's so funny, but I think that with someone like Cory, what you and I need to teach him is artifice, just a little bit of artifice. Just take some pauses, lower it down for a second. Collect people to the table. Imagine that you're not always speaking in a rally. Sometimes you're speaking in a campfire.
yeah,
But
you
yeah,
you
let's
know who
let's get him on
used
the
to.
podcast. Let's work him.
Yes, you know who used who I always loved in his early years, particularly. Joe Biden always knew how to do that rise, and he would, and sometimes he would got it. Joe Biden in his prime, he would speak softly into a thing, and then he would punch right into it. Right, he would bring it down so that he knew that you were listening to him, and then all of a sudden you got pow right into it. And I loved Biden, particularly again in his sort of in his prime. He was really good at doing that. And you could even see it in his debates, like just like bringing you in, and then once he had you, then he had you.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I really feel like these are some of the people that I love, and I wish I and you together, because I think you and I make a better team than me alone. Um, I wish I could have had some influence on him because I think Joe Biden had all the raw materials.
Yeah.
When I was a Senate staffer and he used to come to the Senate floor, a lot of the senior staff would just leave the floor. And it's not because we didn't think he was brilliant. We all knew he was brilliant, but we just felt he was going to talk for too long. You know, I mean, it was remarkable. Everything he said was good, and he was talking off the top of his head, like Robert Byrd. The guy's a genius, but it just went on too long. Again, it's like a little bit of artifice, and that's not quite the right word, but you know what I mean.
No,
The
I know
artifice that I'm
exactly what you
talking
mean.
about is just the skills. Really, it's just the skills.
Yeah.
Because you know something, it's just like I said, when I came to Hollywood and when I was involved, I had this sense of what we're doing is so friggin' important that I've really got to bring my best. Part of bringing your best is studying the art form.
Mm-hmm.
Storytelling is an art. People can do it naturally and do it very well. So you think it's not an art, but it is an art. It's an Olympic sport. I don't know if you ever watched The Moth, but like The Moth is a lesson in this stuff. I love just sitting there listening to people on the Moth because you see the variety and the styles. And the other beautiful thing is, and this is important because we've talked about two people who are radically different. Biden, Cory Booker, like couldn't be more different people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I don't want Joe Biden to end up talking like Cory Booker, or Cory Booker, God forbid, talk like Joe Biden. You know, it's like what I want them to do is to be able to understand the best of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The best of themselves. So, look, I did the WGA Showrunners Training Program. That's the Writers Guild of America Showrunners Training Program. It's considered to be, at least by those of us who feel good about ourselves, the most selective school in the world. Because in order to even get into the WGA Showrunners Program, you have to have a show that you've just sold that's likely to go to on air. So it's very hard to even get in, and they don't even accept everybody.
Yeah.
And when you're at the Showrunners Training Program, you get to hear from all the great writers, Vince Gilligan's and the Aaron Sorkins and John Wells. They all show up and talk to you. And what stunned me about that program was each one of these showrunners, male, female, whatever race, Chandra would come in, they were totally different from each other. But it was very obvious each was the best version of themselves. They knew what their shtick was. If they had a shtick, they knew what that shtick was. You know what I mean? If they had nervous energy, I'm trying to think of his name right now. He's the guy who did Scrubs. And he's got like a whole bunch of shows on the air right now. That guy could not stand still for a second. He was moving around every second. Like I've never seen so much kinetic energy, but it was authentic. It was real. It was him. And you couldn't look away from him, not because of the way he was moving, but because he knew who he was and he was comfortable in his own skin. And so a large part of what you and I are trying to do with the Democratic Party is get us comfortable in our own skin. Get us so that we know ourselves. Get us so that we feel comfortable with our values and our positions and what we're trying to do for people. And the best way to get us into that comfort zone is to have us know where we came from and what motivates us. You've seen me, Jaime. I always start with, why are you really doing this?
Yep.
Where does the passion come from? Where does the heart come from? Why are you willing to, like one of the questions I always ask is, why are you willing to sacrifice to get this job?
And Roger, is that your lesson? Is that your lesson one? For regardless if it's an elected official, a CEO, a nonprofit leader, an activist, if they're attending your storytelling one-on-one class, is that lesson one?
I would think so. I mean, I may not put it first, but that is the core lesson.
That's the core.
Why does this matter to you? Because if you don't know why it matters to you, you're never going to persuade anybody that's important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this matter to you? And as you've also seen me do, like, I don't care what your reason is. The reason could be shallow. The reason could be vain. The reason could be anything. You need to know what it is. Tell me, be honest with me about it. And then I'll help you tell it to the other people if by any chance it's something that nobody wants to know. But if you know what it is, there's a story around it. There's a heart around it, and that drives you. So one of the people that I did this work with was Elizabeth Warren. And Elizabeth Warren, I think, is now a very good storyteller. But when I first, and I've been her speechwriter off and on for many years. I've never been, there are many, many, many people who have done more for Elizabeth Warren than me. But I helped work on her first convention speech, and I helped her work on her first stump speech. And Elizabeth did not want to talk about herself. This is a proud, she's from Oklahoma. She was a single mom for a while. She was somebody who really cared about other people, in some ways, a classic bleeding heart. Bankruptcy. She went into bankruptcy, and she's the one who found that women, single mothers, were getting screwed by bankruptcy law. She found the civil rights in it. But the woman did not want to talk about herself. And what I told her at the time, and I don't know if I got through to her or not, but one of us got through to her. I said, Elizabeth, if you don't explain where your passion is coming from, people aren't going to trust it. Because you're one of the most passionate people I've ever known. But unless people know where it comes from, they're going to think they're going to, like Cory Booker, they're going to question it. And I challenge you now to find a speech where Elizabeth doesn't talk about herself. She does. She talks about herself. And she talks about herself in a way that's relevant to the situation. And that's another thing. So if story number one is why do you do it? Why does this matters to you? Story number two is, okay, well, why is that story relevant to the situation? It's not like any passionate story works.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like every origin story is even the right one. You got to put it in the hands of a Jaime Harrison or a Roger Wolfson, or even better, a Jaime Harrison and a Roger Wolfson, because we have an eye for story. Like I've been a member of the Writers Guild for 23 years. I've sold 11 TV shows, 2 movies, and I've staffed on 5 shows. I mean, I've had a decent career, but day in, day out, I'm picking stories.
Yep.
I'm not writing the first story I hear. I'm workshopping dozens of stories and picking, all right, that one's got some gold in there. All right, how do we pan it? It's like panning for gold. You're sifting through a whole bunch of dirt, and in there's one that's good, and it takes years to develop the eye so you can see that glint of gold.
I love
So
it.
part of what you and I are doing is we're helping people find that right story. Because, by the way, and as good as I might be, my political instincts are nothing like yours. You've had your name on the ballot. You've run the party. So that's why the combination is, I think, really a really useful one, because together we can really help people find that's it. You've got it. Stick with it.
Well, and I want to crystallize this because you and I have alluded to this initiative that we're doing, but let's crystallize it for folks. The venture that we are working on together, and this is about transforming our party, but also bringing more heartbeat and storytelling into the party. It's called Blue Heartbeat. Can you just describe it a little more, Roger, so that somebody who is picking up this conversation right now? It's like, what the hell are they? What the hell are they talking about? Give the audience a sense. What is Blue Heartbeat? What is it, and why did we decide to build it now? And why is it needed right now?
Well, I'll tell you, for one thing, is we can go right to Obama on this one.
Yeah.
Obama just was interviewed by the New York Times, and he was asked about the problems that the Democrats have and what we really need to do. And the first thing he said was, we need to talk like human beings. And
Which
I
is
think
true.
in this day and age with social media as it is, where people are the currency is authenticity, right? That's what gets you views. If you can be authentic, if you can be true to yourself. Even like one of the reasons why Trump succeeds, I think, is that Trump, even though he's a completely dishonest person and completely corrupt, he is authentically Trump. He's not trying to be anything other than himself. What he is, for me, is quite reprehensible. But he's not trying to be anything else. So what we really are doing is we're bringing Hollywood skills, the training, because what I do and what my compatriots do. We've got writers from The Simpsons on our staff, and we've got people who have won Emmys and people who've won Oscars. We've got the woman who wrote Thelma and Louise, Callie Curry, is a part of our team. So we've got people who really understand how to capture information in story. So much of the writer's job is to avoid heavy exposition. You want to convey information to an audience without lecturing them. You've got to do it visually. You've got to do it metaphorically. You've got to do it in action. You've got to find a way to compact a huge amount of information and translate it directly into the cerebrum and the digestive tract of your audience in a way that they can't forget it. We train that day in, day out for years. We reach international audiences. We reach diverse audiences. We loyal audiences. We know how to do this. Now, Hollywood has very often tried to help Washington, D.C., and it has never been radically successful. We've had shining moments probably where we've done well. But by and large, the real reason why we haven't done a great job of it is that the other problem that a lot of Hollywood writers have, and directors and actors, is they really think they know what they're talking about, and they think they know politics better than politicians, and they don't. They don't. Politics, as you know, is a very sophisticated operation.
Yeah.
And there's a condescending attitude that a lot of Hollywood people have about Washington, D.C., and it comes across and they can't translate their values. The difference between me and the people that I've picked to be part of my team are that we actually have political skills. I've had Senate floor privileges.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked on presidentials. So I'm probably not going to say something completely politically ignorant. I might, but then the advantage is I've got Jaime Harrison and his team and Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. I've got people who are going to pull me back from the brink. And what we've got in you, Jaime, is we've also got one of the few politicians who also has really, really good storytelling techniques. So I think what we're bringing together is the best of both worlds. The best storytellers in politics, the most trained storytellers with political experience in Los Angeles. We're bringing them together and we're going around the country and we're training state parties and we're working with organizations like Emerge, which train female candidates, and working with the Democratic mayors. And we're going to be, we're going to be at their convention in late July. Our goal is nothing short of giving these skills to every Democratic office holder and every Democratic candidate we possibly can. I think we can hit the 100,000 mark, within a couple of years. I think we can really get out there. And I think it has never been so important. It has never been so important because we are up against a propaganda enterprise like the world has never seen. The level of, the fact that Paramount right now is buying Warner Brothers. The fact that if you look at Sinclair Media, if you look at Fox News and talk radio, how much solid information and value conveyance is happening on the right. We cannot match it unless our frontline people, and those are the soldiers, the front line of our operation, the people who are actually doing the work, that's our office holders and candidates and our candidates. If they don't have the skills, if they're not armed for battle, we lose. And the stakes couldn't be higher because we're talking about literally survival of the species.
Yeah.
Survival
Yeah.
of the planet. So I think that what we found is inflection point that is the inflection point to make a difference, Jaime.
Roger, who do you think can benefit from this? Is it just candidates? But this training, are there other folks, other groups that you think could benefit from this type of training?
Well, candidates is a very important start, but I can't think of an office holder right now who couldn't benefit. I mean, there's a few people who are doing just fine. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
They're doing just fine. But I think that we need to be able to convey our values in a way that people can understand them, because I actually think that the majority of society shares democratic values, and pollsters will back me up on that. And yet the majority of the public doesn't always vote with Democrats. And that's very often because we haven't conveyed who we are to them in an effective way. But yes, that's just in a political context. I also, and our plan is to work with nonprofits. Look, you're somebody who, after graduating from Yale, which I did not get into, and I'm from New Haven, so I will always resent you for that. But you went to teach in your own high school.
Yeah.
Who does that, man? And then you worked in a nonprofit. You ran a nonprofit. I mean, people don't do that anymore. The people who do choose to do that, they're raising money. They need help in how to raise money. They're
exactly
trying to
right.
gin up the energy of volunteers. They need help in being able to inspire volunteers. They're trying to get the message of their operation out to the public. They need help in doing that. We also have social media strategists, as you know. We've got Noah Evslin, who was Shonda Rhimes' social media guy. He's the one who did social media for Scandal. He established the model of how TV shows now interact with the public. We want to give people these skills. And, the only difference between us and everybody else is that we just want to go to the people who are trying to save the world.
There you go. There you go.
That's our values. We want to help the people who are on the right side of these issues.
Roger, if Blue Heartbeat succeeds 5 years from now, what impact do you hope we've had on leadership and communication in the country?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think if we could really get out there and really do what I think we're capable of doing, I would like to see there be a true and profound barrier against disinformation.
Yeah.
I would like people to be able to see, okay, that emotionally resonates. That's what's true. And because disinformation is the most frightening aspect of social media right now. The second is disenfranchising. What social media is really trying to do in order to make money is to atomize the public, trying to break us up into smaller and smaller groups of tighter and tighter belief structures until the only person you can possibly really interact with is yourself and social media. I think that what stories also do is they build community, Jamie.
Yeah.
Stories bring people together. They bond people. They become, it's not only our shared values, but they're part of our shared rituals. It's one of the reasons why fraternities exist. Fraternities don't just exist, I think, so that people can get drunk and, misbehave. I think fraternities exist because people want to be bonded to other people. The reason why I think you go through hazing sometimes is so you just can tell the stories about it afterwards. So 5 years from now, I would like there to be a barrier against disinformation. And I would like us to be able to, each one of us, everybody who receives our training, everybody who has our values and is trying to help save the world, who cares about the environment, who cares about education, who cares about diversity, who cares about, patriotism, who cares about American values, who cares about voting. I want those people to know that they can find their people and share community with those people, because on some part, they've been trained to communicate and connect. And that is, I think, an important one. I'm so glad you asked the question, Jamie. The real world of the biggest word of all is connection.
Yep.
This is how we connect. And we are dealing with a disconnect that we've never seen, disconnect between us and the truth, disconnect between us and our family members, our friends, people who otherwise would be connected to. We're not connected. I think that this type of training, to me, helps people connect.
I think it's essential. I mean, it is the biggest missing piece in the party. I've seen it for, I've been doing Democratic politics since I was 16 years old. I'm now 50. So for 34 years. And you see bright stars and you see moments in which, it all aligns. But consistently, this is the biggest missing piece. And I think if we add this to the mix, it becomes a game changer for the party in terms of its growth, but most importantly, in terms of its actually fighting and protecting the most vulnerable in our society. Roger, I want to quickly go through some rapid fire questions. So very quick, I'll ask you a question.
But before you get to those questions, I just want to ask you real quickly, because it's been so generously focused on me. I just want to see, I'm pretty confident that you agree with me in terms of the 5-year plan. Is there anything you would add to that? Because I haven't asked you that question before. I'm really curious what the answer is.
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, the one thing that I want, Roger, is there's such cynicism in the body politic right now. People just don't trust folks anymore. People don't have and I saw this when I ran for the United States Senate. Yes, I was not successful. We came up a bit short. But the thing that I saw in that race, and I still feel it to this very day, Roger, the number of young people who just recently I dropped my son off at camp, and my oldest son, and he told me, he said, "Dad, the camp guy who was there told me that you were the first person that he ever voted for." And he just thought it was so exciting that you were my dad. And, and that made me feel really good. I sent him one of my little pins that I've given you, with "While I Breathe, I Vote," logo on it. But Roger, I mean, a few years ago, I was in the airport and I was, just bone tired. I'd been traveling a lot, and this guy stopped me, and he said, "You're Jamie Harrison, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "When you ran, because I ran in the midst of COVID, right? And we were all sequestered at home." And so he said, my 8-year-old daughter was obsessed with you because she saw all of your ads on YouTube. And he said that she made me promise if I ever met you that I would show you this picture. And there's this picture, and I will share it with you, Roger. And maybe I'll give it to Kyle for for the video broadcast so that we can folks can see it as well. But it's this young girl, and she has drawn this. It's sort of a Charlie Brown headed character who's supposedly me, and it has Jaime on it, and I love you or something to that extent, because my campaign through the ads inspired her and gave her hope. And for me, man, that's such a, again, even when you lose, you win, right? Because you
Right.
plant seeds of hope into people, and folks who've gone around for years not having hope. And my what I want is for us to build a generation of political leaders, um, who inspire folks, who connect with people, who give them hope, who eliminate this cloud of cynicism that we have over the body politic. Because it's toxic at this point. It is so bad that I mean, it's almost like you're breathing toxic air, and you can feel your lungs like just closing down. And I want to eliminate that feeling. I not only for myself but for everybody, because I think everybody feels that way. And I think that this venture that we are doing, helping people connect with their personal humanity, to then express that humanity to everybody else, and to connect people on that human to human basis, I think that is so necessary and so needed right now, um, to eliminate this toxic atmosphere that we're in. So I know I filibustered there, man, but
No, well, that's why I'm really glad I asked you the question, Jamie,
yeah,
because I think that I laid out a structure that I want, a delivery mechanism, and you laid out what we want to deliver. You know, once people connect, once we have fought disinformation, once we have a better community of people who are connecting, you then just gave what is the result of that.
yeah,
And the result is we can get back that hope, that inspiration, that beauty, that really glory that is America,
yeah.
that America used to stand for and used to exist for, and just, kind of to bring it full circle. That's
That
kind of where I started, which
that
is that.
shining city on a hill is. I know Ronald Reagan said it, but it's a beautiful statement. It's a beautiful image to think, right? That's what we are. At least
And
what.
it really is. That's the vision that matters most, because ultimately, what are we doing? We're here for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah,
And it can be that. It doesn't have to be a grind. We don't have to dread getting up in the morning and looking at the
exactly,
papers.
exactly,
So
exactly.
thank you, Jamie. I'm aligned with you, and I love hearing it from you. It's
No,
beautiful.
well, thank you, my friend. So, quick rapid fire, and then
Yes,
the big question that everybody wants to know. I will ask you afterwards. So,
sure.
Washington or Hollywood?
Oh, so I have to pick one or the other?
Yeah, you got to pick one or the other.
Well, my heart is in Hollywood.
There we go. There we
I
go.
love being a creator.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Uh, I'm going to get my personal favorite is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which is really interesting because that is a story about a storyteller. He's a compulsive liar, but he's a storyteller, and it's really weird. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I recommend anybody who
No,
sees it just
no,
check out The
no.
Adventures.
I will
Prepared.
put
It's a
that
little
on.
slow,
Yeah.
but it's great. I say it's Terry Gilliam movie.
Favorite television show?
It's got to be The West Wing. But I
Mm.
love The Wire too. But The West Wing is so meaningful to me.
Who's your favorite screenwriter?
Um, yeah, I would be Sorkin.
Yep.
With one caveat, which is I think The Big Short is just exquisite, and I just read the book about it too. The Big Short is amazing. So that's Adam McKay, but I just don't like everything else. And I like a lot of what he's done, but I don't like everything he does. But that movie is a high watermark.
A historical figure that you would like to write a screenplay about?
Oh wow. You know something? What just first comes to mind is Jesus.
Mm,
I really, I just think Jesus was a historical figure who stood out because at that time, who was talking like that guy?
yeah.
I think that we've seen him from a religious standpoint, even from a human standpoint. I don't know if you've seen him almost like from a philosophical standpoint, like what was it like to preach, turn the other cheek during a time when that was not quite in vogue?
Mm. A politician who would make a fascinating television character.
Hmm. Yeah, Obama would make a fascinating story because I'm friendly with his community. That really just a man of that level of discipline and that maturity, dealing with impossible. I'd love to see something about Obama.
Yeah. Okay. This is something that everybody's waiting for, Roger. I don't know if you're very familiar with our show, but every guest on At Our Table gets an opportunity to present a special award. It's called the Sit Your Ass Down Award. So you have spent your career helping people communicate more effectively. So let me ask it this way. What person, institution, or industry has become so focused on talking that they've forgotten how to listen? Who gets the Roger Wolfson Sit Your Ass Down Award this week?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, really, I think Elon Musk is very smart. Um, I loved the Tesla that I had until he put Trump back on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he is a classic example of great potential just gone afoul by a capitalistic system that empowers him too much. I don't think there's anybody around there who can slap him down. Even Trump can't slap him down. Um, but back somewhere in there was a man of some principle who cared about space exploration, who cared about electric cars. I think that there's somewhere in there, there's a human being in there, but it's so far removed at this point, I can't see it. And I'd really like him to shut up at this point.
Yeah. Well, Elon Musk, you are this week's recipient of the Sit Your Ass Down Award. Congratulations.
Yeah, Elon, woo! Another victory.
I know. Roger, you've spent your career in two industries, built around characters and conflict, Washington and Hollywood. If you were casting the movie version of American politics right now, uh, who are the main characters? What's the plot? And does the movie end with hope, tragedy, or a cliffhanger?
Oh, wow, that's such a great question. My God. Okay, so it's hard not to talk about Trump. Um, but look, if you look at Trump, I mean, real quick about Trump. Trump ran for president 3 times, and he couldn't have won the previous times. He is a sign of the times. Abraham Lincoln could not run for president now. He existed at his time period. He had a famously high, pitchy, squeaky voice.
Mm-hmm.
He could not have made it in a time of radio. FDR, because of his disability, couldn't have made it in a time of TV. JFK obviously beat Nixon because we were in a time of TV. Trump exists right now because we're in a time of conflict because of how social media favors controversy.
Yes.
So the players are people like Mark Zuckerberg. He and the guys from Google and the people who are really helping capitalism and the profit motive completely decimate society. Those are the puppet masters. And I feel like if they could be given a heart, like if we could insert a heart somewhere in those brain mechanisms of theirs, it would be amazing. And I think that that's also where Aaron Sorkin and I kind of share some values because he's got a new movie coming out that's the sequel to The Social Network, where he's trying at least to comment on this a little, but not enough. But I think right now, that is the story. The story
Mm-hmm.
is how capitalism is really capitalism plus AI. That's a very, very, very scary combination.
Yeah.
And
How
so
do you
at
think
this
it?
moment,
How do you think it ends?
at this moment, it's a cliffhanger. But I on a fundamental level, I like to be an optimistic person.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do. So I think that just for the purposes of my own spiritual practice, I'm going to leave with a cliffhanger rather than predict worse. But again, it comes down to, yeah, something? That's why I believe in what we're doing. I don't want to be self-laudatory at all. The only thing I think that I hold really closest to my heart is my values. And part of my value has always been, what's the interstitial point? Where can I plant my lever so that I can move the world with whatever skills and whatever weight I can pull on it? I really feel like what we're doing right now is existential, Jamie.
I agree.
Because I didn't even mention AI. I was just talking about social media with AI coming in and the disinformation, and the fact that we won't be able to trust anything, and we won't even know if we look at a video whether it really happened or not. Oh boy, do we need to be able to connect with each other.
Well, and in this movie, I hope the American people who are waking up, I really do believe that they're the heroes. They're the ones
And
that
let's put
will.
it this way: anybody who has listened to this whole, your audience right now, everybody who's listening right now, they are part of the heroic
Yeah.
element of society.
Yep.
They clearly care enough to listen. They clearly, I hope that they've listened this long because it resonates for them. And I hope that all of the people who are listening will become part of what we're doing. Support us. If you have skills to offer, come. We want to train 100,000 Democrats. We're going to need foot soldiers. We're going to need help. And if there are people who are listening right now who are inspired by what we're doing, reach out to us. Let's find a way to get you involved. Let's find a way to train you. Let us train you, or let us help take what you've got to train others.
I love it. I love it. Well, folks, and Roger, and you can give the website if people are interested in learning more about Blue Heartbeat. Where can they go?
www.blueheartbeat.com or blueheartbeat.org. I think that we've got our contact information too. Just email us, let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you'd like our help on or what you'd like to help us with. We can't wait to hear from you.
Well, one of the lessons I think from today's conversation is that people rarely remember every fact, every statistic, or every argument, but they do remember stories. And they remember the people who made them feel seen, understood, inspired, and connected. And, from the halls of the U.S. Senate to the writer's room of Hollywood, Roger Wolfson has spent a lifetime understanding that truth. And I'm hoping through our work with Blue Heartbeat, we're going to help leaders and organizations and communities really rediscover the power of authentic human connection, and to do that through their stories. So, Roger, thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your partnership. And thank you for joining us at our table.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Such a pleasure.
So until next time, folks, pull up a chair. There's always a seat for you at our table. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Blue Pixel, or anywhere you find your podcast. For bonus content and analysis, join our community on Substack at jamieharrison.substack.com. At Our Table with Jamie Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hyder and Jamie Harrison. Our producer is Kyle Kelly. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Lauren Brown. Our social media strategist is Nia Asanta. Inez Smolansky provides production legal. Title sequence by Tom Hutt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. Special thanks to Roger Wolfson. I'm Jamie Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.